Hey everyone, it's Raghu back with Mindrolling and Lodro Rinzler, who I have not talked to in quite some time. Welcome, Lodro.
Hey, thanks for having me back on the show. I am very excited to be here.
So, Lodro is many things, amongst them meditation teacher and author of a number of books. And there's a new one out which has grabbed my attention. You are good, you are enough. And it really centers around the fact that we all have a basic goodness that we need to maybe recognize a little bit more. And this book will help to do that. But I wanted to get into some of the things that are in it. Yet, what have you been doing lately? We got to catch up a little bit.
I know. I was going to say before we start
recording, it's a different world.
Thing.
No, I mean, look at this. That's a way understatement.
I know. I feel like last time we were talking about anxiety to some degree for my book, Take Back Your Mind, Buddhist Advice on Anxious Times. And man, that book's not going out of style. Right? It's like still anxious times right now.
Really?
Personally, the main thing for me is since you and I last got together, I have a daughter. She is about to turn 3, which is insane.
Wow,
and she
great.
is so sweet and so compassionate. And we're doing the things sometimes where we're like, where were you before you came to mommy and daddy? And she's not yet at the point where she's like really considerate. And then she'll like change the subject and go somewhere else. I was like, okay. She'll tell us when she's ready.
Wow. I know, it's amazing. The reality out there. I just talked to a good friend of mine, and his partner mentioned to him that, do you know the telepathy tapes? Have you ever heard that?
No. Tell me everything.
Oh, yeah. I only know about them, and I haven't really gotten into it, but I know people who have. And, so this particular person his girlfriend has a friend who has a daughter who is completely autistic. Mm-hmm. I think nonverbal is what they call it. So it's some level of that, and is completely psychic. And children, apparently, they know how to be in touch with each other. They get together. I'm not quite sure on what medium that is, in person or, however they do it. And he was blown away because this girl who's now maybe 12, 13 or something said, so your friend has a boyfriend who is, and rattled off a litany of who this guy is, and she never said a word, nothing. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, it all goes under.
I think it's fascinating. I am not normally the person that like gets behind things like that. I'm open to it, but I'm sorry, I believe it because just the other day she was like, Otis is at the library. I was like, no, babe, Otis is in school today. And Otis was out of school that day and at the library. And I was like,
oh, yeah, right.
What?
Yeah. So, but
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Everything is.
I could do an hour on my kid, but that's not of interest to other people. I know this. I understand
this. This may be of more interest. Who do you never know. But everything is possible is what I know. The way that I'm seeing you and speaking to you and hearing you, that reality, I know it as that reality after seeing Neem Karoli Baba and the reality around that, which was beyond this plane of living and consciousness for sure. So I'm open to it all, even though I'm like you. Yeah, I haven't paid them. I didn't hear the telepathy tape. Well, maybe, that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. It's one of the reasons why I think we get along, because practicality, making stuff that may be arcane from, spiritual traditions of the East, et cetera, and making it real for people, which is why, and, you're speaking to basic goodness, right?
Yeah, which... I went with a topic that is near and dear to my heart and I think is the most important thing. But, I even in the course of this book, there's some things that I'm sort of like, okay, so this is a story from a past life of the Buddha. And now I'm opening up Pandora's box to all sorts of things that are somewhat esoteric in Buddhism. And I think sometimes about this wonderful thing that the Tibetan Buddhist teacher Khandro Rinpoche said about these topics, where she said sometimes when it comes to rebirth and karma and the different realms, Westerners, that you have a hard time with that. And so you try to discount it. You say, okay, I like everything in Buddhism except for that part. That part I can't prove. So since I can't prove it, I'm going to not take it on. She goes, what if instead of just discounting it, you said, I'm going to grapple with it. I'm going to keep an open mind. And I'm going to see what I can understand about it. And I was like, that changed my life, actually, because all of those sorts of parts of different traditions, I might say, oh, I don't know about that. I can grapple with it. I can keep an open mind. I don't have to just say that's not my experience, so it doesn't count, right? Like, that's arrogant. So I'm definitely open to some of these things.
Yeah, curiosity is a wonderful thing. It really is, And You just, it's funny, we're talking, Lodro and I were talking before we pushed the record button, and just about, some of the realities around what's going on these days. And we were talking about, okay, well, we haven't talked for a while. Boy, things are a little different now, And we also talked about this podcast, Mindrolling, part of Be Here Now. There's a little bit of a ad here. Be Here Now Network is going into in its 10th year, because Lodro said, how long have you been doing this? 10th year. And we're having a celebration and doing, a benefit this summer. And then you mentioned just now Khandro Rinpoche, which everybody, and you just casually said her name, and it's a her. When Tibetan thing, it's not a lot of hers, although they're trying to change that. And she is extraordinary, and she speaks English perfectly. Yeah, producer who's going to do show notes, let's get her centered in the show notes on this. She can be accessed, because she is phenomenal. But the other little part, Lodro, mindrolling.
Yep.
This is so this Lama comes from the tradition which is called Mindrolling, which I knew about, and I was very connected to her. I've actually never met her, but connected to her just being in courses online, this, that, and the other. And so I thought, well, I thought it said mind rolling, but it's Mindrolling. And so I thought, wow, that's it's about enlightening oneself in the garden of good wishes and something great. Okay, I don't have this right. I don't even have it right. But the reality is, I just loved the feeling, and I loved what she represented. So that's how Mindrolling came into existence.
Incredible teacher. My first job out of college, for people at home, I've been meditating since I was a kid. I, grew up in a Tibetan Buddhist household. And my first job out of college, I was
Wait, can you talk about
director.
that? I don't remember that.
Yes, I will. I promise. My first job out of college, I was the executive director of the Boston Shambhala Center, which was way too big a job because I had no real work experience to speak of. And we hosted a lot of really incredible Tibetan Buddhist teachers. And they would all come through, and I had the incredible fortune to sit with them for a few minutes before they would go up and sort of introduce them to the space and to talk to them about what's going on in the community. Khandro Rinpoche came frequently and was always the person who right off the bat would go, okay, so first of all, how is your practice going? Not how many people are coming, not what's new with the community. Let's talk about your practice first.
Let's talk about you.
Incredible. And she would get up in front of all of these very seasoned practitioners. And the first thing she would say to the community is so sweet. She'd go, you have to make sure you're not giving Lodro a hard time. He's very young. he's very young, and he's trying really hard. To be very nice to him because you're a community and you should be nice to the people, particularly the people who are helping this. Anyway, she was wonderful. She still is wonderful. But yes, I grew up, my parents were students of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche before I was born. And so this concept that we're talking about in the new book, you are good, you are enough, basic goodness, it was just infused in my household. I feel very lucky that this was just in the water that I was swimming in. That when something went wrong as a kid, it wasn't I'm a bad kid, which is so common, particularly back then in the 80s. Oh, this is a bad kid, this kid's being bad. This kid is basically good. They are whole, complete, awake as they are, and they are confused in this moment, and thus a mistake is being made. And, we can talk about mistakes without the kid being painted as a bad kid. And it's such a subtle distinction I'm making, but it really was so important in my upbringing, more so than growing up meditating. I mean, growing up meditating, I imagine, influenced me dramatically, but that seed that I was inherently awake, inherently whole, complete as is, and then things happen, we get confused about that. That's really phenomenal. So I started meditating when I was 6, and then doing weekend retreats when I was 11, and then did a very temporary ordination when I was 17, and then just never went back. By the time I was 18, I was at university. I was invited. At that point, I had grown up I had never not had a Buddhist community. Really? And there I was at college away from it, and I really missed it. So I said, I'm going to put up posters all around campus, because this is like early internet days. And people came, and they were like, cool, so how do we meditate? It's like, oh, you don't know. Of course you don't know. Like, it just didn't occur to me until then. And so I started importing teachers from the surrounding area. Can you please come teach everyone meditation? And at a certain point, they just got sick of the commute and were like, you've done the requirements for a teacher training. Why don't you go do it? So when I was 18, I started teaching meditation pretty badly, and then gradually kept going. And I'm 25 years later, I'm still doing the thing. So that's my trajectory overall.
That's fortunate. Okay, I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I'm incredibly fortunate.
Yeah, you are. But I count myself amongst the fortunate in relation to meeting incredible beings. And one of them was Trungpa Rinpoche. You're reminding me of when I came back from India, my father had a farm. My whole family are devotees of Neem Karoli Baba. They've been to India and the whole thing. And he had a farm just over the Vermont border. And we get together, Ramdas and a bunch of us, Krishnas, we would get together. And then from there, we would go to, it was called Tail of the Tiger in Vermont.
Now called Karma Choling, yeah.
Karma Choling. And we would go, and Trungpa would do his thing, and had a lot of fun with Ramdas in particular, actually. And all of us, he used to say, oh, they're here. The love and light people are here. Welcome.
Right. Yeah.
So we had fun. But it just, I found this thing from Trungpa. I mean, he's a controversial teacher in some ways, in many ways. But I know what happened for me, and don't much care to, because we are in, this culture is so judgmental about everything, and most of the time with spiritual teachers, they're right. That's the hard thing, Trungpa was extraordinary. He said, without others, we would have no chance at all to develop beyond ego. So the idea here is to feel grateful that others are presenting us with tremendous obstacles, even threats and challenges. The point is to appreciate that. Without them, we could not follow the path at all. Yeah. That is a seminal statement for me, no? I mean, it's what, I know it's what you're engaged with as well. That's, we see eye to eye.
Oh, it's spot on. And, he passed away in 1986. I was born in 1982. So it's not like I studied with him, in any formal way. But what I received in videos, in his books, his teachings, his transcripts of talks, has been, very inspiring. And, at this point I study with Khandro Rinpoche, who is a teacher out in the Pacific Northwest. And he also spends most of his year in Tibet, or about 50-50, I suppose, at this point. And
he can travel back and forth to Tibet. Really?
Yeah, that's a Chuka
Lama
region. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
know
and he's doing really phenomenal work over there in rebuilding the monastery, but really community center, essentially, for that region. And incredibly kind, incredibly compassionate teacher. But I obviously have that root of, my parents were in the tradition of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And I think that there is something really phenomenal in that quote, because it's easy for us to say, okay, I'm basically good. Raghu, you're basically good. I know you, I can see it. And then it's really hard when I say that annoying neighbor, or that world-threatening politician, or someone else, that ex, people at home are probably thinking about that quote and saying, well, what about this person? They're not basically good. But the idea that he imparted, that is just baked into our lived experience, if we look for it, is that everyone possesses basic goodness. That, when I was a kid, I asked my parents, the Christians, they've got this Adam and Eve story, what's our version? And she very skillfully, my mother, said, there was wakefulness, and then it second-guessed itself. And
your mom said that?
Yeah, and that was it. And that is, there's a sense of we're basically good. And I see this even in my kid. It's heartbreaking at this point. She's turning 3. And there's moments where I see her start to recede into herself, because the other day, I said, oh, your friend Isla's coming over. And she goes, what if Isla doesn't want to play with me? And I will not cry on your show, but I really choked back the tears in that moment. I was like, okay, honey, but what if she does want to play with you? I think she will. Let's see what happens. But maybe we put in that. But it was just that, the seed of doubt of, well, one time these kids didn't want to play with me, so maybe it's going to happen here, and it's so young, but we all have that. We have wakefulness, and then we start to second guess. Well, maybe they don't want to play with me. Maybe they don't. As adults, it's maybe they don't want to date me. Maybe they don't want to hire me. Maybe that, whatever it is. But we've internalized this insidious voice. It's referred to in that tradition as the trap of doubt. That we fall into this trap of doubt. We doubt that we're inherently good, whole, complete as is. And we start to act in ways that are really confused, because we're not in touch with that wakefulness. Yeah. So, I think particularly when we start to look at others and these people that we might deem as hard or difficult or impossible, to start to seek to understand that basic goodness could actually be pretty revolutionary.
Yeah. The doubt thing, of course, you have some pretty potent things to say in the book about doubt. But it just reminded me, one day, I'm sitting with Neem Karoli Baba and a bunch of hippies, basically Westerners, but we were all in our early 20s, just out of the psychedelic scene. And a new person came, Westerner came, and he sat behind us, and he was just confused, being with this energy. He couldn't grasp it. And so you could see he was a little bit shaken. And Maharaji, we called him Maharaji, said, what's up with him? What, through a translator, however he said that. What does he want? Maybe he probably said. And I think maybe there was one other comment, but I volunteered. Here's what's going on, Maharaji. I can tell you. He's confused coming here and sitting here. He's confused and this, that, and the other, whatever. So Maharaji looks at me and he goes, in English, which supposedly he didn't speak, doubt. I've had that with me this is, a long time, shall we say, many, many, many decades, Lodro. And it resonates every time I get into the moment that you just described, right? The vacillation from judgment about who we think we are to completely just being here with what we are, contented.
Yeah, doubt comes in many forms, right? I think even when it comes to meditation, for example, I'm talking about basic goodness, and people are like, what is this? What is this thing? It's us getting in touch with our awakened nature. So when we're sitting on a meditation seat, we might have this experience where we're just with the breath for a moment. We're fully 100% present with things as they are. And then we say, is this it? Is this basic goodness? It feels okay. Like I'm okay in this moment. And then we second guess it. And then we do that when we read the teachings, when we hear a talk, when we meet a great teacher, right? Like this is just something that, because we've internalized stories of not enoughness, we start to get to the point where we say, I'm going to doubt all the other things. I'm going to doubt this incredible practice that's been around for thousands of years. I'm going to doubt this incredible set of teachings that has been around for thousands of years. That's actually one of the manifestations of the trap of doubt, is a sense of, they call it arrogance, but it has that sense of, I know better than to actually trust these things. Which again, when we let go of those stories, we're essentially surrendering those stories, and we find a sense of openness and connection to these things. There's probably some real potency, but we have to sort of let go of those stories first.
Super, super important. Actually, I did an audio book with my podcast partner, Duncan Trussell, called From the Movie of Me to the Movie of We, and we used ourselves as examples. And so I'm reading this, and you say, from a young age we're bombarded by media ads, social conditioning, well-meaning parental advice that builds up this idea that we're incomplete as we are. I would say that's a mild way of putting it. I mean, it develops the habitual patterns and neurotic tendencies from the moment, like when your daughter at maybe 6 months old, what's her name?
Ruby.
Ruby's, so we love you, Ruby. Oh, and then Ruby's going, well, I'm a something, right? I'm a Ruby. And whatever that comes with, and then the development continues as a separate entity. Ram Dass's whole thing was about, and we did this movie, becoming nobody. And in it, he said, you cannot become nobody until you become a somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And, but yeah, then you're contending with everything that you spoke to here. Then we all have that moment when we realize someone else has nicer clothes, better toys, or we start comparing everything. That's often when we begin to doubt our basic goodness, and this leads to a lack of confidence and a feeling of deficiency. Well put. This is mindfulness. When you get to the point where you can use meditation and of course then mindfulness to have a purview, to have a perspective, and look back and not down yourself. We do that all day long, and have a perspective that just, oh wow, interesting, a curious perspective. No,
it is, yeah. And as you noted, the stories are ingrained so young. And I share a story in the book about my friend Neil, and he came for a visit, and he told me that, as a gay man, he grew up afraid of what people would think about him if they knew who he really was. And it's just by virtue of being attracted to men, the societal messaging taught him that something was broken inside of him. And, he did overcome that messaging and come out. But it was many years later when he first heard these teachings on basic goodness that he was stunned. He said, I don't think I've ever heard anything like it. He said, is this how people have been moving through the world, with a sense that they're fundamentally worthy and not just inherently deserving of shame and blame? I remember it so clear. I was like, yes, that can happen. But the fact of the matter, it's not just Neil. that
No,
realized that he was okay.
everyone.
It's
There isn't.
everybody. Yeah. But we all think we need to be fixed in some way. If it's not that, it's something else entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
even if someone didn't receive messaging like that, there's probably that story probably resonates with many people who are listening, because this is where I go full anti-capitalism. I mean, the whole point of capitalism is built around this basic confusion around our sense of enoughness. And we're told this lie that we don't have enough and we need something external to us to make us whole. And that could be by the cosmetics industry saying we need makeup, or the diet industry, or even some areas of the wellness industry. Like, companies make money off the idea that we're not okay. And if we come to them, they will fix us. And if we actually woke up to the idea that we are basically good, those industries would probably fall into the ocean, right? So, it's in capitalism's best interest to keep us locked in. No, buy this thing. Okay, that thing didn't work. That's on you, but we'll give you another thing. And that's just how we've been cycling through. And unless we come to some wisdom teachings and we start to say, maybe there's another way. Maybe I can look within.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I love? We both love the same Tibetan word, which is gom, right? And it translates to become familiar with, or familiarization. And that's used in respect. You're speaking to it in respect, obviously, to meditation itself. Why don't you maybe expand on that, Lodro, because that's really what it's about. Not about, I'm going to meditate, I'll get enlightened, or I'm going to meditate, I won't have, PTSD, or whatever the goal thing that we, in the West particularly, have that as part of our lexicon. And forget that. How about?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. And it's exactly what you said. However people fall into meditation, I'm all for it. But it does its magic, and it becomes more than just the initial idea of what we have of it. So Gom, can be translated as meditation, or it could be translated as become familiar with, or familiarization. And the idea is that the more we become familiar with all of who we are in meditation, the more we befriend ourselves, the more we offer friendship to ourselves, the more we learn to love ourselves. And, my wife just got home, and, I think back, and it's not like I met her and then we were in love. There was this period of I'm going to spend time with you. I'm going to become familiar with you. I'm going to get to know the good, bad, and ugly, and then I get to propose marriage, right? So it has this quality of the more we spend time with ourselves, the more we actually start to understand all of who we are. And it's this tried and true method for learning to love ourselves unconditionally. So it's actually very deep in that regard.
Yeah. People are afraid. It's interesting, when talk about meditation, people are afraid to engage primarily because this isn't really something I can do, I mean, I have so many darn thoughts, and, I'm chasing them, and well, that's kind of the point of meditation, at least the most rudimentary point of just getting one pointed. Talk about point, and then having a way to, again, having a perspective, from that perspective, being able to see what is going on, and getting friendly with yourself, I mean, is key, Ram Dass, the latter part of his life, the most emphasis was on this teaching around loving awareness, and moving away from the stories you tell yourself, the thoughts, and all that, into the center of your being, and just, I am loving awareness. Nothing more or less different than what you're speaking to.
Yeah.
Right?
I am very much pointing at the same thing. Yeah.
And what happens, see, many, people on the path, they know what it's about in terms of, mindfulness, and be aware of your motivations, and so on and so forth. But it's usually done from that same place, right? that is judge and jury as to whether that is something good or bad. And from that place, then, that there's not much that can happen because you've really cut out any possible curiosity by immediately going to the negative, right?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's pretty prevalent in today's world. Pivoting just slightly here.
Yeah.
I think that
Pivot.
when it comes to basic goodness, there's this thing, I talk about it towards the end of the book, where there's this story that I heard. This professor, Jules Davidoff, went to Namibia, and he was spending time with the Himba tribe, and he noticed something very interesting, which is that they did not actually have a word for the color blue. Now, upon looking into this, apparently the word blue actually we think it's always been around, but it had not actually existed. The concept of blue itself didn't exist until around 4,500 years ago.
How's that?
We look at classic Greek texts, Hebrew texts, Chinese texts, they're not there. It's just they don't say blue. They have other words. And so he
other words to describe blue?
Yes. He sits down with the Himba tribe. He offers them a large paper with 12 colored squares. The squares are identical green, except for one that was blue. And he said, which one's different? And the Himba, it turns out, they didn't have a word for blue. They still had not developed that. And in fact, when they looked at the squares, they didn't see the one that stood out. So to them, all of the squares looked the same. And the hypothesis that came out of this was the reason that you and I, in that particular case, would be able to see blue clear as day, and the Himba universally could not, is that we had been introduced to blue as a color. At some point, someone took you outside and said, see that sky? That's blue. And then once you had that category, oh, that's blue, you start to see it everywhere. You see it in clothes, in furniture, on walls. Before we had a word for it, it may not have been as visible in that way. Someone had to point it out. So I mention this because that's the same thing with basic goodness. That's been my experience, that I obviously was raised with it. I was very, as you said earlier, fortunate to have done that, to have been raised within this culture. But the point of You Are Good, You Are Enough, this new book, the point here is to point out basic goodness. And then once people start to see it, they start to go out into the world and they look around and say, it's not just me that has basic goodness, it's everyone. We see it wherever we go, in the same way we would now see blue. When we're young and someone says that's blue, we see it in the flowers, in the art. Here, the point of the book is to introduce people to the experience of basic goodness through the practice of meditation. As you said, it's a little bit more than mindfulness in that point, but through mindfulness, the practice itself, it unveils basic goodness. We can see it in the practice if someone points it out. So then we see our true nature, and we start to see it more and more in the world around us. That's why I did this thing. That's it, right? Just so that people could start to see this in themselves and then start to see it in one another. And I really, speaking of, okay, the world's on fire, it's troubling times, I think if we start to recognize basic goodness in one another, then it will really transform the world.
First question that we're going to hear from the audience, which is only me right now,
Go on.
We're not live, is bad actors.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump to we've got bad actors, tremendously bad actors going on right now. Actually, some of this is embarrassing, but Ram Dass, on his altar, he would keep over the years bad actors on his altar. And hi, how are you? In this case, it was Donald. How are you doing, Donald? And he would say things like, I know this is a very tough incarnation that you got right now, but behind all of that, there you are. Mm-hmm. Someone who wants happiness like everybody else, et cetera, et cetera. And so Ram Dass, he'd jibe me about it because he knew I'd be responding like, I cannot do that.
Yeah.
I am absolutely sorry. I've failed. I have failed, but I can't. And we would have this fun dialogue. But it was a dialogue that was real for just, 99.9. There's some place you could be just walking by, somebody on their computer in a coffee shop, and boom, something jumps out at you, and your gut reaction is a response that belies the theory of basic goodness. I'm kidding, but you know what I mean.
But I understand your point.
That's what goes on in the head.
Yeah, and listen, I've been talking about basic goodness for many, many years. When you talk about it, someone smart, is going to raise their hand and say, well, what about this person? Right? They're not basically good. I always try to avoid sort of triggering figures in conversations like this, but I'll just say, like for many years, it was, what about Hitler? And then, starting in 2015,
you got it in the book, so this is
it's in the book. There's a whole chapter on villainization, on world-threatening politician. I've gone down this road enough. I know that people are going to have this question, the bad actor question. 2015, people started to say, what about Trump? 2022 was a big year for what about Putin? We started increasing the number of people who said, but not that person. They can't be basically good. That's the hole in the theory. It's not a theory, by the way. It is an experience. When I talked about meditation before, it's something we can experience. It doesn't have to be, it's not dogmatic, it's not philosophy, it's something that we can live. And my short answer is always a little bit dramatic, like, yeah, even that person. And it's not, the longer answer is everyone is born with basic goodness and they get confused. And then they act from that confusion as opposed to their basic goodness, which is a different thing than saying everyone's bad, right? But Hitler, he did atrocious things. Like, these are crimes against humanity. I'm not saying he's a good person. No, he's not worth admiring. This is not what I'm saying. He was so distanced from basic goodness that he was able to convince himself to do horrible things and that they were right, when clearly they were not. But, Hitler didn't come out of the womb hating people. That's not in the same way that any child we know doesn't come out of the womb hating people. That's something, that's learned thinking. Mm-hmm. That hate then distanced him from any semblance of basic goodness. And the consequences are catastrophic. So it's really hard to bring that up and say, okay, even that authoritarian ruler, that politician, or whoever, they possess basic goodness. It's difficult for me to grapple with, to be honest. But as you noted in that story, they have people who love them back. They experience moments of genuine open-heartedness as a result. And there's definitely someone listening be like, I can't believe this guy's using Trump. Fine, you could swap that out for Biden. You could swap that out for anyone that you have closed your heart off to. That is fine. Whoever you think is a bad actor, to use the term that you said. Yeah. But, going back to Khandro Rinpoche, there's that famous quote that he said, which is, everybody loves something, even if it's just tortillas. Right? So it's that. It's like everybody has the ability to soften, to connect to the world around them, even if they just love tortillas, right? Like, this is, everyone possesses basic goodness, no matter how confused they get. Yeah. And I also think, when I talk about this sometimes, of this wonderful quote, before he passed away, Representative John Lewis.
Oh, God, yeah.
He was on Krista Tippett's On Being. And I remember I heard this, and I have to jot this down. I listened to it like 10 times before I got it all together. And he was talking about the early civil rights era. And he said, we from time to time would discuss, if you see someone attacking you, beating you, spitting on you, you have to think of that person years ago. That person was an innocent child, innocent little baby. And so what happened? Did something go wrong? Did the environment? Did someone teach that person to hate, to abuse others? So you try to appeal to the goodness of every human being, and you don't give up. You never give up on anyone. Yeah, that's right. And I love that, because that's it. Yeah. We don't give up on the goodness of anyone. Anyone can come back. And even that politician, maybe, hopefully.
And people will say, easy to say and harder to enact. But all we have to do is think about ourselves, because whatever's in anybody else is somewhere in us. And whatever phenomena happens socially, politically, environmentally is us. It's not separate. It's not something else.
100%. And that's when I'm like in these like Q&As and things like that at the end of talks, I always bring that up. I say, so what about me or you? Right? Like, are there times that you have felt disconnected from, basically, you've acted out of confusion, you've caused harm to yourself or others? And literally everyone is nodding because we've all done that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, maybe we don't wield the same power as,
yeah, the destruction
nation,
that's a whole other thing. But
we do that. It's that sense of like hurt people, right? Yeah. So all of a sudden these quote unquote bad guys or bad actors, they're not acting from their best self. They're acting from pain and hurt. We know what that's like. Could we even get to a point of understanding, maybe some glimmer of compassion? Mm-hmm. Because no one wants to lead a life marked by hate. I don't believe that. I don't think people want that. Mm-hmm. But when we close our hearts off to others, that's what we're doing. And we're doing it to people that we think are doing that. So it becomes a whole reifying cycle.
You know, it's a good story that you have here. Maybe you can tell if you can remember. I think you will, though. Because you just mentioned it, you know. Everyone is a baby at some point. What do you say? Babies in your life really push your buttons. It's a good thing. And you tell the story of Atisha.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, me too.
I was using this a lot before there was a kid, but absolutely, I'll come back to this being a baby thing. But so there's this Buddhist master, Atisha, who lived several centuries ago. He was incredibly wise and was asked to travel from India to Tibet to offer teachings there. But he had heard this rumor that the Tibetan Buddhist people were incredibly nice. He's like, it's exactly what you were talking about earlier in that quote from Trungpa Rinpoche. He goes, that's not going to help me. Like, if everyone's nice to me all the time, I'm not going to grow spiritually. That's not going to work. So there was this Bengali tea servant, and this guy apparently was a mess. And he was dropping things, and he was always saying inappropriate things. And he really tried Atisha's patience and compassion. And so Atisha was like, okay, this is the person who's going to push my buttons. I'm going to bring him. And he knew that without someone challenging him, he's not going to develop the qualities he wanted. Patience, kindness, equanimity. And so the joke goes that he got to Tibet, and there were plenty of people that did just that. So this person was superfluous. But that ultimately, that's such a good attitude to have. That, you know, if we just stay at the same level of like either keeping into our bubbles and only talking to people who think like us, or not engaging with people that we would ever find difficult in any form, then it's like we're lifting. I went to the gym this morning. It's like lifting the same dumbbell over and over again. You know, like at a certain point, the muscle adapts and the training doesn't progress. But if I picked up something 5 pounds heavier, 10 pounds heavier, and did that, there's a strain, it's discomfort. But that's when the growth happens. It's the same thing with our spiritual journey, that we need beings like that. So the joke here is, of course, that this is like, you know, having a toddler in my house is that, you know, even while we've been recording, you know, they came home and there's some loud noises. I had to mute myself. It's fine. It's totally fine. But it's like, oh, here's something to work with. Can I look at it from the perspective of how great that there's this like little tiny dictator sort of defining my sleep schedule and my, you know, eating schedule and all the things. I can work with that, right? And it's easier when it's like, oh, this is my kid. If it was someone else's kid coming to stay with us for a week, maybe I'd feel differently. But I still, to take that attitude of, oh, this is good for me. Yeah. This is good for me to have opportunities to grow spiritually. Yeah. It refrains some of the difficulties we have, which is a little Pollyanna for some of the difficulties we have. I know if someone has life-threatening illness right now and are hearing this, that seems F you, Lodro, which I understand. But within reason, that there's, you know, I'm not saying go from lifting 20 pounds to 100 pounds because your arm's going to fall off. But it's like, can we go through the little periods of difficulty? The Atisha tea servant of dropping the glass or whatever, that level of things can actually be really helpful for us as spiritual opportunities.
Yeah. And it develops that perspective that I keep bringing up. That perspective allows us to really see clearly. Much more clearly, at the very least. by virtue of engaging that way, right?
Yes, 100%.
You know what I like? This thing you did, the 5 A's that allow love to flourish. I mean, those are great. Attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing. That is that from David Rita?
Rico, yeah. David Rico. He's a longtime therapist. He's a wonderful author. It's from his book, How to Be an Adult in Relationships, which is such a great book for people who are curious about this topic. Yeah. And I sort of unpack them in the context of basic goodness here. And as you just named them, that the first A is attention.
Just really start there. I mean,
sure.
People, look what we do. This comes up a lot with me on podcasts with whoever. It doesn't have to be some meditation teacher, but it's about the most human thing, the most human quality is attention, and you know it because how many times you're with and you're directly eye contacting somebody, and you go turn your head left or right. Or your eyes roll, or you do something, and it absolutely is so destructive, really, to another human being. There's a French author, and I can't remember her name, but she said the most generous thing that you can do for another person is pay attention.
I love that. And it echoes something that Thich Nhat Hanh also said. Yeah, that just to give someone our undivided attention is such a gift. I was in New Orleans last week, and I popped into this wonderful shop, Voodoo Authentica. I was buying some candles for my wife, and I said, "Is there any special instructions for these? Should she start them on a certain day?" And the person behind the counter, he said, "Here's the thing: you could start on a certain day. You could base it on the color. You could base it on astrology. But here's the thing that I've been here a long time." When someone lights a candle and sets an intention and sits with it, can they just show up and mean it? Can they just show up and mean it for their spiritual practice? Because no one can do that these days. People can't do that part. That's the most important part. I was like, that's it. That's it. He actually went on to say, and then you look at like Deepak Chopra and Tony Robbins, all of these mindfulness clowns. That's all they teach you. And I'm sitting there going, mindfulness clown could be a good job title for me. I could take that on. Yeah. But it is. That's all we're talking about. It's like, can we give something our full attention? In this case, people, like my wife, can I give her my full attention? Just being there. That's the first A.
Yeah.
The second one's acceptance.
Yeah.
And I joked earlier that like, I went through a process and said, okay, I got to know this person. Here's the good, bad, and ugly. And then I get down on one knee and I say, I accept you 100% as you are. Like I've gotten to know you and now I want to spend my life with you. The joke, of course, is when someone does that, the other person's like, cool, I have not had that chance to go through that process. You are making me say yes or no right now. But, there is something like, when we got married, eventually, we both were on that same page of, yes, like, we understand the situation. We accept each other as we are, the eccentricities, everything. The third A is that of appreciation. And it's something that I've only started working on in the last couple of years since I was working with this particular text, these 5 A's, where I was like, oh, I don't do this enough, which is just the simple power of saying the appreciative thing that we might just be thinking in our own heads. We say it out loud to the other person in a regular and consistent manner. There's this incredible author and speaker, Brad Montague. He's incredible. He has a Substack. He's on Instagram. People can find his work. But he has this cool thing that he does where whenever someone comments on something, he finds something really nice and appreciative to say about them. That's so specific. Like they actually are seen and heard. And he said, what I appreciate about you is X, Y, Z. And it's like they may never have met, but he's still able to do it. I love that. There's something so powerful about that. Just going and talking to people. Here's what I actually appreciate about you. The fourth one is A, which is affection. I'm mixing methodologies here. My wife's love language is touch. That wasn't particularly how I was raised. So it took me a long time to figure out, like, oh, sometimes the most powerful thing I can do is just hug this person. That's it. And I, while doing research for this book, read that in Disney World, they have a hug rule. All these characters that like are dressed in the mascot costumes, the Mickeys and all of that, they're not supposed to let go first when they hug a kid. The hug goes as long as the kid wants. And the idea behind it is that you never know how much a child may need that hug, which every time I go back over it again, I'm not going to cry on your show, but I get right there. And so I just started adopting that for my wife and child. Like that's just my unspoken rule. The more that they don't know it's happening, the better, because that's just the sense of like.
Just to interject, because we want to hear the fifth one. But when COVID happened, you couldn't hug anybody.
Horrible.
No, I thought it was the best thing that ever happened. I was like, oh, this is great. And, we put on retreats all the time, and people, they want to go. No, COVID. It was a bit of a Larry David, if you know who that is.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, COVID, we can't hug.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm from Montreal. That didn't happen. Okay, same as you.
Fair enough. Yes,
way.
Right. This is not my love language. I don't need that. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yes, and the fifth A is allowing. And that just comes down to letting your partner or your friend or whoever it is be who they genuinely are and do the things that they love to do. And I mean, I think you can see that there's a lot of overlap of these things, but when we lose sight of our loved one's basic goodness, it's probably because we built up a lot of fixed ideas about who we think they are. And we take them
who we think we are.
And who we think we are. And, my wife knows that I frequently will reference the fact that sometimes she leaves out like glasses around the house. And it's not, she always leaves glasses around the house. This is just who she is. It's not that it's like, oh, this is like a wonderful human being. Like when I look at her, this is my idea of her that I'm seeing. No one has that set group of ideas about her but me. Her mother doesn't. It's a very different set of ideas. When I look at her, it's like, oh, this is someone who, is basically good and they happen to have left out a glass. It's a very different perspective, similar going all the way back to that story about how I was raised. But the perspective of you're not bad or you're not wrong, it's just you're basically good and this is something that happened. It shifts everything in my experience.
Yeah. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, when he wakes up every morning, first thought, nothing exists. He says, I remind myself that nothing exists as it appears.
Love that.
Isn't it? And he goes on to say, everyone wants to be happy, but they're suffering. Then I generate compassion to help people transform negative emotions. I've been doing it, actually. I don't know why I saw it. It must have been a social media thing, maybe. And it's a wonderful way to stop the first thing you do, which is, and we've talked about the movie of me goes on. You're the director, you're the producer, you're the you're the actors, you're even the critics, and you read everything that they say until that is at least acknowledged. Very difficult for anything to happen at all.
100%. I love that as a morning practice. I'm going to, when this comes out, I'm going to write it down and I'm going to practice it.
We're getting close. If you don't mind me, I'm reading some of what you wrote.
Go ahead.
It's okay. Okay, we're going to end with this story that you have in the book, which is really what it's all about. And this is from the Jataka tales from India. One day the forest where the parrot lived caught fire. The flames spread rapidly, endangering all the creatures who called the forest home. Now a parrot has wings, so the bird's first instinct was to fly up and away to safety. But as she ascended, she heard the cries of her fellow forest dwellers. Overcome with compassion, she decided to act. She swooped into a nearby river, soaking her feathers in water, then flew back to the fire, shaking off the droplets over the flames. Back and forth she went tirelessly, trying to extinguish the fire, ultimately getting burned herself as she struggled to save everyone. Meanwhile, in what is referred to as the God realm, divine beings were watching this parrot. They laughed at the sight of this tiny bird's futile efforts. Their mockery caught the attention of Indra, the king of the gods, who was curious to see for himself. Transforming into a mighty eagle, he flew down to meet the parrot. "What are you doing?" Indra asked. "You're not really making much of a difference, and you're about to be burned alive. Get out of here." The parrot, undeterred, replied, "You're a much bigger bird than I am. I don't need your advice. I need your help." Indra was so moved by the courage and conviction of this small bird that he began to cry. His divine tears, far more powerful than the parrot's water drops, poured down, extinguishing the flames and saving the forest. Some tears fell on the parrot herself, healing the burned feathers and making them grow back in colorful hues. Thus the parrot's courage and compassion not only saved the forest, but she became more beautiful than ever. That's fantastic, Lodro. Okay?
Yeah, and the best part is that I didn't make it up. I can agree with you because it's not my right. I'm conveying the story, but it's not my story.
Yeah, but it is our story.
It's our story, and it's the story of creating change in the world. And it is a beautiful story of compassion and one of how we don't have to do it alone. I think the story here is that this parrot is saying, hey, look, I'm trying to help. And that magnetized much bigger resources to actually create positive change.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, as we keep referring to it, these troubling times, are like, I can't help the world. Who am I in my small corner of the world to affect DC, to affect Iran, wherever? Mm-hmm. It's not about, I'm going to go solve for X, Y, and Z alone. It's a sense of, can I contribute something that small is positive things. To this world? Small things.
Yeah, small things.
Drop by drop, the bucket fills up. And, I think that it's a powerful story. And it has so many aspects to it that even including the fact that the parrot became more beautiful as a result.
Yeah, right.
We become more powerful, more potent spiritually as we engage in trying to create positive change. Yeah. And it doesn't always look like we think it is.
Yep.
I always think of this analogy of like throwing a stone in a pool of water. We don't always see where the ripples will go. Mm. So whatever we're doing, and I'll just offer one more thing, which is there is a website that I recorded meditations for at this point 14 years ago. And they continued to exist out there in the world. And I started getting emails this week of people saying, what happened? I've been to this meditation. And I looked at this point, they sort of shuttered the website. It probably hadn't been active for quite some time. Yeah. But these people were writing me saying, I was practicing with this meditation every day. So now I'm sort of like, okay, well, which one was it? Maybe I can find something similar. I can offer it to you for free, etc. But I never would have expected that thing. I went into a studio one day, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever it was. And now there's these people that are like, but this is the practice I do. Mm. It's crazy to me. So it's a great example of, I don't know what I do, if it's going to have some effect, a lot of effect, help one person a lot, help no one. But I'm going to try and make the effort, right? Because even the small things that we do, an hour in a recording studio a gazillion years ago, can have an impact on someone's life in a really positive way.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make it about me, but I think that's something we all can do in our various ways.
That's about little things that we all can do. Yeah. No. Wonderful, Lodro. Great to see you. Great to hang.
Thanks so much for having me back. Yeah.
The beauty of podcasts. Everybody, why don't we show a copy of the book? There you are. You are good. You are enough. We're going to put a link there. You'll send me a link we can give to the producers, and people will be able to find you as well elsewhere, and everything else we're talking about, Trungpa and David Rico. That actually, I want to do a podcast with David. If if he's still
I'm
with
sure
us.
he'd love to, really.
Yeah? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you'll introduce me.
Okay.
All right,
Seriously,
everybody.
thank you for doing the good work that you're doing. You've been doing this for 10 years. That's an incredible offering to humanity. So thank you.
It's hard to believe, but yeah. So this is Mindrolling on Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and /Mindrolling, or anybody else like Joseph Goldstein. Do you know Joseph, right?
Yeah.
Everybody. Okay. My last thing here, I just wrote to Joseph. I said, we got to do our yearly podcast thing. And I referenced something, because we have mutual friends and so on. He said, I don't know what you're talking about, but let's do the podcast. And I'm thinking, great. This is perfect. We will see you next time. Thanks again.